everyone. Hi, Dr. Akhtar. Hi, Professor Lakshmikanta.
Hello.
Great to see you. It's so good to see you finally.
Yeah, finally. That's great. Thank you so much for putting all of this together.
No, thank you. We're live, so we'll wait for our other panelists to join in the main room, and then we'll get started. We'll give them a couple of minutes to join in here as we get started. Hello, Dr. McDowell.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Professor McDowell.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Akhtar. I see
Hello, Steve.
Ravindran. Hi, Nandini. There's Madhu. Hi, Madhu.
All right. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Good day, rather. Good night as well. Yes, if it's a late night for you. We've had people. We have people joining us from different time zones. So that's wonderful. This panel is being streamed live. So let's go ahead and get started with the panel with formal introductions. First of all, a warm welcome to everyone joining us on YouTube live stream. Like I said, good day to all of you, depending upon where you're streaming this from. On behalf of the organizing committee of the 8th South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference, I'd like to invite you all and hope you enjoy our live stream today. My name is Vaibhav Diwanji, and I'm an assistant professor at University of Kansas, and I've been a part of this organizing committee and the conference since last few years, and it's been a pleasure. We're humbled to see the continued interest in the conference despite the pandemic situation worldwide. We received several abstracts and presentations from different parts of the world, including those from our esteemed panelists on this panel right here today. And we had a wonderful day one of the conference. We had a roundtable session that helped us understand the current state of South Asian media and cultural studies from different perspectives, from education, from research, from practice. And today we'll be discussing in this panel the futures of South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference. We also had a wonderful keynote address yesterday focused on disinformation. Very comprehensive. I personally really enjoyed it. So hopefully, you get a chance to watch it on our YouTube channel and provide feedback there and, connect with other scholars and practitioners there. Our roundtable panel today is focused on the theme of imagining futures. Our aim is to reflect on the future of, like I said, the South Asian cultural research, media research, public policy research, strategic communication research, education, as well as practice, and draw future directions in these fields. The event is being live streamed on YouTube. We request our live audience to participate in this panel by posting their questions and comments in YouTube live chat. And I come from a marketing background, so I'm going to plug in for our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel to get regular updates, and click on the bell icon for receiving notification. And also don't forget to like the video. We have wonderful panelists who are joining us from different parts of the world today. So first of all, welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to have you all. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to start with quick introductions for everyone, starting with our moderator for the day, Dr. Tom Taylor. Dr. Tom Taylor, AICP, teaches leadership, intercultural communication, consensus building, and conflict resolution classes at Florida State University, and works as a private consultant and trainer. He was previously the associate director of the FCRC Consensus Center for 20 years. That program addresses critical problems facing Florida. It promotes and provides mediation, facilitation, and other collaboration services. It's an honor to have you with us, Dr. Taylor, and thank you for your time. I will now introduce the panelists quickly so that we can get started with the panel, starting with Dr. Rabia Akhtar. Dr. Rabia Akhtar is the director of Center for Security, Strategy, and Policy Research, University of Lahore. She's also the founding director of the School of Integrated Social Sciences, University of Lahore. She holds a PhD in security services from Kansas State University, which is not too far from where I'm sitting right now. She is a Fulbright alumna. Dr. Akhtar received her master's in international relations from Quaid-e-Azam University and her master's in political science from Eastern Illinois University. She's written extensively on South Asian nuclear security and deterrence dynamics. She's the author of the book titled The Blind Eye, US Non-Proliferation Policy Toward Pakistan from Fort to Clinton. I look forward to reading that book, Dr. Akhtar, for sure. Dr. Akhtar is also the editor of Pakistan Politico, Pakistan's first strategic and foreign affairs magazine. She's a member of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Foreign Affairs, and she's a non-resident senior fellow at South Asia Center, Atlantic Council, Washington, D.C. It's an honor to have you with us, Dr. Akhtar. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Madhurima Sarkar Swaiskud. Dr. Madhurima Sarkar Swaiskud is the Economics Affairs Officer in Disaster Risk Reduction at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for South Asia and the Pacific. Dr. Sarkar Swaiskud has a PhD in health communication from Florida State University. So a shout out to my fellow FSU alumni from the School of Communication. Before joining ESCAPE, she was senior researcher at Nationwide Children's Hospital and Ohio State University, focusing on adolescent health communication, and health equity. At ESCAPE, she focuses on intersections between disasters, climate, and health, and the pathways to build resilience to systematic risks emerging from the impacts of multiple hazards in Asia-Pacific region. She is key author of the 2017, 2019, and 2021 Asia-Pacific Disaster Reports, a flagship publication of the United Nations, and has over 30 publications in various peer-reviewed journals. Her current research focuses on climate change impacts on vulnerable populations and developing capacity building tools on climate adaptation for policymakers to support risk-informed decision-making across economic and social sectors. It's an honor to have you with us, Madhurima. I would call you Madhu. So thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. We have Professor Gopalan Ravindran. Professor Ravindran is a professor and head of Department of Media and Communication, Central University of Tamil Nadu. Earlier, he was professor and head of Department of Journalism and Communication at University of Madras. His research and teaching interest focus on following areas: critical theories and philosophies, political economy of journalism and communication, spatiality, temporality and materiality of communication, critical pedagogies in journalism and communication, film cultures, digital cultures, and diasporic cultures. He has co-authored 3 books, and he is the General Secretary of All India Communication and Media Association. It's an honor to have you with us, Professor Ravindran. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure and duty. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Professor Nandini Lakshmikanta, a very close friend and very, very dear colleague in the field. Dr. Nandini Lakshmikanta is a professor and former director working for Manipal Institute of Communication of Manipal Academy of Higher Education, a lead educational institution in India. In her 20 years of experience in academics, she has served in various educational institutions. As a researcher, she has completed 3 major research projects sanctioned under Indian Council of Medical Research and Indian Council of Indian Council of Medical Research. Too much to read for me, sorry. For the government of Karnataka, she has worked on augmenting employable skills among BA students, a study on Bangalore University. Her recent book is titled Reproductive Health Among Young Women, Issues and Challenges. We look forward to hearing more about it during the panel today. She is an author of 3 books and has contributed chapters to several books. In 2015, she earned DAAD scholarship and went as visiting professors to Hochschule Bremen University in Germany. In 2017, she was invited by universities of Louisville, Kankakee, San Jose, and Florida State University to deliver lectures on health communication and Bollywood blockbusters. Apart from academic activities, she is a corporate trainer and takes assignments on building future leaders by conducting workshops on transformational leadership. She manages multiple podcasts, and she conducts workshops for young girls and their mothers on menstrual hygiene and management. It's an honor to have you with us, Nandini. Thank you so much for your time today. We have Dr. Tanu Kohli. Dr. Tanu Kohli is faculty in Florida State University Center for Global Engagement and Florida State University College of Social Sciences and Public Policy's International Affairs program. She's a thought leader on campus internalization, diversity, and inclusion, which is a topic very close to my heart personally, focusing on learning innovation in the field of global learning. Dr. Kohli's research interests lie in intercultural competence development, collaborative international learning, and the South Asia diaspora and recent migrants. So thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Kohli. It's an honor to have you with us. She's also a part of the organizing committee of the South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference. And finally, we have Dr. Steve McDowell, who is the co-founder of the South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference. He currently serves as Assistant Provost for International Initiatives at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, and also as an interim dean in the College of Communication and Information in 2021-2022. He is John H. Phipps Professor in the School of Communication at Florida State University and was Director of the School of Communication at Florida State University from 2002 to 2013. His research and teaching interests address new content, new communication technologies, and communication policies in South Asia and North America. He has co-edited with Professor Sahana Udupa, Media as Politics in South Asia. He has co-authored with Philip Steinberg and Tammy Tomasello, Managing the Infosphere, Governance, Technology, and Cultural Practice in Motion, and written a book on India's communication policies, globalization, liberalization, and political change, a political economy of India's communication sector. Dr. McDowell has held fellowships with Canadian Federal Department of Communication in Canada, with Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute in New Delhi, India, and congressional fellowship supported by the American Political Science Association in Washington, D.C. He served as the chair of Communication Law and Policy Division of the International Communication Association from 2008 to 2010. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. McDowell. So as you can see, it's a panel full of people from diverse areas, diverse interests, and that's why it makes it so special. I would stop there and I would invite our moderator, Dr. Taylor, to take it from here. Thank you so much once again. You're muted, sir.
Very good, thank you. I just want to emphasize that for our live stream audience, that this is a different kind of conference. There's, as you all know from your field, there's lots of information out there, but what we really need is knowledge that we can use. We need to be able to synthesize that down. We've had about 30 different panel presentations. Hopefully you have seen some. I doubt that anybody has seen all of them, maybe a few people, but they are a rich source. And the speakers, if they were in a conference, they'd get feedback right at the end of their session. But in this format, it's really valuable for the speakers and for everyone who sees these and are stimulated by the key ideas to ask questions, to go deeper, offer comments, to add perspectives to that. And we have had reviewers who have looked at each panel. They've synthesized that into kind of a couple paragraphs, and those have been further synthesized by Dr. McDowell into short statements that we'll be kind of looking at today. And yesterday, the roundtable was saying, what is the state of South Asian media and communication studies? Today, we're looking at our imagined futures. And so with that in mind and that theme, we want to kind of look at those statements. They're on the live stream at the bottom, kind of look over those. We're going to be asking our panelists to talk about what their passions are. You know, where do they see their academic and practitioner work going in the future? And, you know, how is that a part of the larger field? And we're going to kind of capture some ideas that supplement that list of statements, and then, have a chance to reflect on that and polish those to really become a shared vision as you are leaders in this field. You are practitioners, you're academics. How do we move this forward? We need to know where we're going. So I am looking forward to these presentations. You have a chat feature on live stream. As you're listening to these, if there's a question, write it down. If there's a comment, if there's another way of looking, you don't agree with this is what I see is going on, put that into the chat. We'll have someone reviewing those. And at the end of the presentations, we'll again be looking at these statements, asking you to rate the acceptability, agree with it. Do you agree with this or not? And is this something we can say that this is where the field is going? And then we'll be taking some questions and giving a chance for our panelists to respond to the things you put in the chat. So with that, I'll let Viva kind of introduce or ask our panelists to present, and we'll look forward to hearing what they have to say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. Yeah, as he said, we'd love to hear from your perspectives on, the key themes that emerged from this year's conference presentations. But more importantly, we want to hear more about your work, and how it contributes to imagining the futures, all from the perspectives of practice, from the perspectives of policymaking, from research, as well as from pedagogy. So, let's take about 5 minutes each of us to quickly introduce our work, and, we'll then start reflecting on the summaries or the key themes. So starting with Dr. Akhtar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Devanji, Professor McDowell, and Professor Taylor, and all my fellow panelists. Greetings from Lahore, Pakistan. One of the reasons I agreed to be, part of this conference was by proxy, my proximity to Kansas, because I'd been missing it. And when I, read your profile, Professor Devanji, it's as close as I can get to Manhattan, Kansas. So thank you so much for having me here. I am really fortunate to be part of this panel because all of the fellow panelists have very diverse backgrounds. From where I come in, I am a security studies scholar. I look at nuclear weapons and as to how they shape the dynamics of security within our region in South Asia, and also broader regional dynamics and international security. And from where I see it, it's, if I'm being a realist, the imagined future is not all rosy. It is scary. Given that we live in a neighborhood where 3 nuclear weapons share borders, most of them contested, between India and Pakistan and India and China. And the role nuclear weapons are playing in their current security policy doctrines, and more reliance by the 5 nuclear weapon states in this world who consider themselves to be legitimate nuclear weapon states because they're part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty Club. Their reliance of nuclear weapons sort of then trickles down and enlarges this debate where smaller nuclear weapon states, even with smaller nuclear weapons in numbers, do not want to move towards arms control and disarmament because they consider themselves really insecure. And when you see the first generation developing smaller nuclear weapons, low yield nuclear weapons to be used in battlefield, that does not really, give much of a confidence to countries in South Asia to talk about arms control and disarmament. So from that perspective, the future is pretty bleak. Secondly, at the conflict resolution level, both India and Pakistan, as our fellow panelists and audience who's interested in this subject is aware of, have this outstanding dispute of Kashmir. And as long as that dispute remains, there will remain space for crisis between two countries. And the fear is that as both countries try, to explore each other's thresholds, and that space for crisis remains, strategic stability in South Asia is going to be threatened and will remain fragile. And that's one of my biggest worries, and that's where my work on deterrence dynamics comes in. So this is broadly how I am looking at the region. And with respect to imagined futures, you want to see in the long term a nuclear-free South Asia. But like I said, there's a trickle-down effect, and there's a strategic chain dilemma that we face. And until and unless the big five stick to their commitments of disarmament that they made, that promise to the world community at large, I don't see these, other younger nuclear weapon states following that suit. So I'll stop here, and I look forward to people engaging with this subject. Thank you.
Absolutely, a very important topic to discuss on, and it needs a multidimensional and multidisciplinary discussion for sure. So we really appreciate your research, your work, and we look forward to hearing more during the panel later. Thank you so much, Dr. Akhtar. So from one policy researcher and scholar to another, Dr. Madhurima Sarkar-Swaisgood, I invite you to reflect on your work and how it relates to imagining futures. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I as I was listening to Dr. Akhtar, and thank you, Dr. McDowell and Dr. Taylor and Dr. Dewanji for inviting me to this important sort of initiative. And as I was listening to Dr. Akhtar, I think in this region, in addition to the nuclear issues, one of the other great issues for probably the foreseeable future is going to be climate risks, right? And that's sort of my area. And it's interesting, while I was listening to her speak, that how some of these risks intersect with each other, right? So for there to be sort of a stability with nuclear proliferation, you need stability of populations. And climate change is something that really disrupts the stability of populations, vulnerable populations. So at least in our research, what we have found is that, climate, with the sort of warming of 1.5 degrees beyond, the IPCC just came out with its latest report, IPCC 6, in August of last year. And after that, the COP26 happened, which took its sort of background from the IPCC research. And one of the key things that IPCC research kind of showed is when we're sort of inching towards this 1.5 scenarios, there is good linkages between global warming and the increase in disasters and increase in natural hazards. Sorry, not disasters, but natural hazards, because for us, we consider disasters to be man-made, but natural hazards to be natural. Right, so I think that's one of the key issues, is that with global warming, natural hazards are going to increase. So we're already seeing increases in flooding, increases in drought, sand and dust storms. And these are all climate-related hazards, and these are going to increase in the region. Now, kind of going back to what I was saying about intersections, a lot of climate hazards are really, really impacting vulnerable populations. Agricultural populations, for example, some disasters like flooding disproportionately affect women. So I think that's one of the things that we really need to consider, is that when we talk about imagining futures, we can't imagine future for only one thing. We have to imagine it in a multi-sectoral sort of comprehensive level, so that, you know, something like migration, for example, or even conflict for water conflict or conflict within land can potentially trigger something that Dr. Akhtar is talking about. You know, so I think we have to be very, very nuanced in our discussion, and we cannot just have a discussion on one thing, and that is very difficult to do. I think that is the sort of challenge that we face, is that all these risks are cascading, and, you know, one thing leads to another. They're overlapping and intersecting. So I think that's where, at least from the research point of view, I think that's where we need to really imagine our future. And you know, research is also, I think this is a really important initiative, because this shows that different research, as everybody mentioned, we're so diverse, but that doesn't mean that there are no intersections. And I think that's where we have to find the commonality and sort of work towards understanding how those linkages happen, and then how can we find the solutions. And there are solutions that, you know, can potentially speak to different sort of risks. And I think that's where we need to really start figuring out what those solutions are and what those policies are that can really have sort of the biggest benefits, and multiple benefits to multiple sectors. So I will stop there, and thank you.
Thank you so much. We couldn't agree more with what you said about having an integrated approach to finding solutions to these different kinds of risks. You know, while the whole world faces singular threat in the form of the pandemic, you know, the South Asian region is facing so many internal as well as external threats, as you both highlighted. So this discussion right here is very important as we imagine the future of the region together. So thank you so much for your thoughts, Dr. Sarkar Swaisgood. Thank you. I'd like to invite Dr. Ravindran, Professor Ravindran, for his thoughts and his work related to futures of South Asian research. Thank you.
Yeah, let me at the outset thank the organizers, particularly Steve Weibel and Tom Taylor and others for giving us all these opportunities during the pandemic time to imagine. It's difficult to imagine about some of the issues that have been raised by the presenters. Media, particularly the Indian media of the filmic kind, have their own imaginations. Okay, these imaginations have always denied us the possibilities to think about the ground realities of several situations which interpolate all of us in South Asia in terms of the state of everyday life, particularly in which I am more focused these days. I also started as a student of communication during early 80s with a lot of dreams and processes of imagination, because I was a child of the media environment that was killed by the Indian emergency during 1970s, mid-70s, when Mrs. Gandhi was the Prime Minister for nearly 1 year. 19-year-old school-going and college-going boys like me, we were not taught anything about journalism then by our parents to read newspapers and magazines every day. So myself and my elder brother, who was elder to me by just 2 years, we used to go to the nearby newspaper stalls and look out for all these newspapers and bring them to home, read them, and that shaped my idea of journalism as not media. That term did not exist during the 70s and 80s in India. We started using the term media only after the collapse of Soviet Union. Thanks to the collapse of Soviet Union, you have in India now thousands of television channels. I pondered to think over this. If the Cold War extended and Soviet Union did not collapse, we would not be having thousands of channels. Okay, and these cheaply available transponders during the early 90s in countries like Philippines, where they had intermediaries. That's how I entered journalism and communication as a teacher. And I am sorry to say that as academics in South Asia, particularly in India, particularly in South India, where I have been teaching for the last 40 years and doing research, I don't find any real linkages with what is not happening or what is happening in the media environment. For instance, one of the key themes of the presentations wants us to focus on labor. And yesterday also we had a panel discussion on media labor. We have very condescending approaches to labor and laborers. Okay, all the academics in India who are working on issues of labor to use the term laborer only with regard to illiterate people. So we don't consider a journalist as laborers. Okay, we can forget that, we can accept that, but because including myself, the teachers, researchers, students are products of our peculiar temporal times, where we had our schooling, where we had our journalism or communication, education. Our biases and privileges are on account of this. We can't escape from these biases as academics. If I choose to work with only qualitative methods, that's because I travel in a particular way. If I don't like the numbers game in research, that's because I started traveling in a particular way. So if I am choosing critical political economy approach, that's because of my bias. As a result, as yesterday Professor Biswajit Das pointed out, we miss out on other lenses, and other lenses can get us other realities. So the first challenge for us some of the continental philosophers and some of the Indian philosophers, the foremost Indian philosopher who can open many insights for us communication teachers is Buddha, who wanted us to be mindful. So most of us are not mindful researchers and academics. And how can we create a generation of young scholars who will be building traditions in communication research in South Asia. In the absence of seniors, including like me, I share a lot of burden too, because for the first part of my career, I missed out a lot on this. I was an insensitive teacher. I didn't factor in the social reality where my university was located. I didn't think about the community around the university where the poor people were living. So only for the last 15, 20 years, I have been factoring in all these social realities in engaging with media reality.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ravindran. I want to remind our live audience that because we're connecting from different regions, there might be a lag in, the communication here. So please, we appreciate your patience, and if we, if we are not able to hear, we'll definitely give you a chance to sort of repeat, but we were able to hear most of your, presentation, Dr. Ravindran. You point out a really important point that, it has to, as we imagine the futures together, we have to bring different lenses together in terms of training the young minds and in terms of guiding the policy making in this area. I appreciated that you said that, think about the ground realities, and that's, and the everyday lives of people, because you talk about political conflict, you talk about natural disasters, you talk about internal conflicts, the state of media, it all affects us as individuals. So as we imagine the future, it's important to think of individual perspective and, what can be done at the individual level. So I appreciated your thoughts there. Thank you so much once again.
My pleasure, Anjuti. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to Nandini, Dr. Lakshmikanta, Professor Lakshmikanta, if you could reflect on your thoughts and your research interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vaibhav, Steve, Tom Taylor, and all my panelists, fellow panelists. I look forward to India from Sustainable Development Goals 2030, because it's not just a concern of India, but it is a concern of the entire world to reach 2030. India particularly, which is surging technologically in all aspects, you name it, it's surging ahead. So when we are competing with the first world or developed world, we have some minus points too. That is largely health. Of course, in this particular conference, my video is largely on road communication strategies because that's my recent study, and I have largely worked on safety, how to protect, how to create awareness. There are certain issues which I have been working, be it health. Again, I bring in health because it's very close to my heart. And health and even road safety, they have interlinked, because both of them take care of human lives. Say for in all my work, I have tried to find a solution. Tom, in our breakup room, this interaction, he asked me, what do you understand by solution based? Correct, Tom, if I'm right. He asked something like that. So I say, for any question we all raise, say for it started with me in one of the presentations which I heard. The presenter was talking about the mouth freshener, the microorganisms that are existing in mouth fresheners, in different hotels or eat outs in Manipal. I'm in Manipal. I work as a professor in Manipal presently. So she was mentioning about it. Fine. Indian habit is to lay your hand after in the plate. Usually the mouth freshener is given to you in a plate and you lay your hand. Like me, so many people lay hand and we all consume the same. Nevertheless, my issue is not that. Obviously, different microbes could be there, and she was mentioning liver, that, this, and that. But then, what is the solution? You just say this is a microbe, this spoils your heart. No, I believe in giving solutions. So in all my research work, I have been giving solutions. So in my health research, when it comes to reproductive and empowering women, I have gone to villages. I have conducted focused group discussions, and I have told them about the village welfare committee, and I have seen the changes. Women in the next welfare committee, they have raised these questions and that has empowered them. So this is one aspect. And the same thing which when I apply it to the road, what I did is, as a researcher, I take up a project and then I finish it. After the project, my projects are published in a journal. Then maybe it will go to the Ministry for Policy. But how will it create awareness? So now in this, what we did is we joined our hands with Udupi Traffic Sense. The place is Udupi. We joined our hands with Udupi Traffic Sense, and we started participating in all the activities of Udupi Traffic Sense. And this Udupi Traffic Sense belongs to doctors, engineers, teachers, students. So it's a self-monitoring group on media. So any violators on road, their photo will be published in social media platform. Why I insisted on these issues is, see, in India, of course, I have traveled with I have traveled in many of the American and European countries, and I have seen how fast the cars and the vehicles zoom, and the safety measures also taken. The lanes, segregation of lanes, particularly in Europe, you will see the cycle tracks. Every vehicle has got their own track, and when it comes to US, it's lanes. You have more than 3 in a vehicle, then you are in a different lane. You are single, then you are in a different lane. You are national highways, subways, all those things I have seen. Now, in India, things are happening. India has got the history of GT Express, which started from Afghanistan, passing through Pakistan and reaching India, passing through India and concluding at Kolkata. So that's the longest route we have had. Now, in India, the majority of the transport happens through road. Whether you want it, you don't want it, it happens through road, and roads become very important. Now, how do I connect road and health? The both are sustainable development. One directly, the other one indirectly, right? Infrastructural development and all that. And along with this, we are land linked with our neighboring countries, be it Pakistan, be it Bangladesh. We are land linked. So if this can improve, if even China for that matter, if the relations, we know the relations are very sensitive. If the relations improve, if there is peace, and then if there is coordination, then I think India, the South Asian part, can rule the world, including I mean, we can overcome even USA. I'm sorry to say this, but yes, I know the power of this region because it's rich in its culture, rich in its resource, rich in its natural habitat. That's the reason we are more densely populated in India. Right. So here, when I look to the infrastructural development, be it health and then road, how do I connect these? I look to it from improving tourism, health tourism, and then the moment there is tourism, there is revenue. So right now, I think I'll give a pause because I'm very passionate about it, and I know being a professor, I'll go on. So let me give a pause here. Let's take up as it comes to us. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We share your passion, we share your interest, we share your sentiment about sustainability and an integrated effort, as has been the theme of different discussions so far as well. Thank you so much, Professor Lakshmikanta. With that, I'd like to invite Dr. Kohli to reflect her thoughts and her ideas about imagining futures. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am glad and honored to be part of this esteemed panel. As Vaibhav mentioned earlier, I am a part of this conference's organizing committee as well, which is a beautiful opportunity because I get to see the wonderful work that everyone is doing. But my opening remarks today are embedded in globalization studies and teaching innovation. So basically in globalization studies, the tension is between this whole idea of, oh, there'll be a flattened world and there's a spiky world, and ultimately everybody will be living in a culturally hybrid, equalized world. And as far as equality is concerned, whether it is in economic growth and security or stability, as Drs. Akhtar and Sarkar have pointed out, the outlook is in fact bleak. We have to be very careful. We have to be very, we have to sort of keep in mind that we live in democracies in South Asia, which are fragile, and democratic futures are being challenged in multiple spaces today. It does not help that COVID-19 has not made the situation any better, whether it is in South Asia or among South Asian diaspora, as demonstrated by the study on intimate partner violence that was presented in this conference. But on the other hand, when we look at globalization and look at it from the lens of cultural hybridity, we see that there are increasing bicultural and multicultural flows of knowledge, scholarship, even popular culture, folk stories that are coming out of the region. And so we see greater visibility of South Asians, whether it's in information technology, media, popular culture. And the good thing about it is that they are not all negative anymore. I think it would be unfair of me to say that we have solved the problem. We haven't. But media representations are moving from sort of this negative, stereotypical views of South Asians, say as nerds or whatever we might have, to become slightly more positive. So I think that's a sustainable change. The key for future would be to keep this momentum. We shouldn't talk, we should start looking at South Asian influence in the rest of the world, not just between, say, South Asian countries and the US, but also what South Asian regions influences in European countries, African countries, South American countries, and so on. So that way I see the future of cultural studies in South Asia moving towards more bicultural and multicultural flows. And in that sense, I'm also echoing what scholars and practitioners in this conference have said so far. So in the future, what do we need to do to make sure that this flow of information is representative? And I think in that sense, I would echo what Dr. Ravindra Gopalan said and a bunch of other folks said in the conference yesterday, in the future, we need to gear ourselves toward more decolonized, diverse, and indigenized stories as well, because South Asian countries have their own histories and biases, and we need to kind of deal with that internally. So if you're talking about cultural hybridity, we can't say, oh, we are hybrid, and then just to present a dominant cultural version that is coming out of our countries. So I think alternative and new media will be very useful to amplify these voices. As far as teaching and learning is concerned, which is where I come in, the decolonized curriculum is going to be very helpful. And in the United States and universities like Florida State University, where we have an entire strategic goal on diversity and inclusion and campus internationalization, this whole idea of decolonizing teaching has become really prominent. But how do you do it? That is where the future lies. What are the tools and tricks that you can use in the trade to make sure that we are, in fact, sort of encouraging these cultural flows and encouraging them in a non-biased manner? We can't just say that, oh, we are hybrid because now we have one reading on Pakistan and one on Nepal and one on India. We have to be a bit more intentional. And in that way, some of the innovation can come in, say, co-teaching. And Dr. Uma Wangal, who was a part of the panel yesterday, is doing something like that in filmmaking. At Florida State University, we have also formed partnerships in collaborative international learning. So currently, Florida State University, for example, has a partnership with a university in Brazil, where students at FSU talk to students in Brazil. And the idea is that they are talking to each other with an equal exchange. Their assignments are such that they have to implement what they're learning from the other culture in the curriculum, in their assignments, in their assessments. So what ends up happening is that these kind of little learning innovations like co-teaching, decolonizing the curriculum, maybe meeting online to study with somebody in a different part of the world altogether, is gonna help with this, bringing this cultural hybridity. And these kind of learning innovations then also jump the challenges that we see with studying abroad, which is expensive. Many people can't do it. So in that sense, in the sense of the cultural studies curriculum and how do we ensure that we are introducing hybridity despite all of these challenges, including all of these challenges, I think that's where we are headed to. We are headed towards a more maybe using knowledge to our using knowledge to our benefit rather than kind of repeating the same dominant narratives. But that's all.
No, that's wonderful to hear, Tanu. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and sharing your ideas. Again, reflecting the same theme that, you know, it's a shared future, it's a shared experience that we have to emphasize on, and more importantly, emphasize on implications rather than just, you know, outcomes. You know, what can we do in real world and how can we apply it so that everyone benefits at the individual level, at the organizational level, at the regional level, and at the global level. So absolutely, thank you for bringing that up. I want to remind our live audience on YouTube that you have an opportunity to interact with our audience, our panelists over here, by asking questions and comments. So please do ask questions, and please do give us ideas on continuing this discussion as well as enriching it. So please do that. Also, in addition to hearing to this wonderful panel, each of our panelists have also spent time and given us their wonderful presentations, detailed presentations, which are more related to their area of work. So please do go to the conference program and watch their you know, presentations which are available, and, you know, reflect your thoughts there as well. It's really important. Thank you so much. I think with that, Tom, I'd like to invite you back as a moderator, and you know, let us know how you'd like this discussion to continue. Thank you.
Okay. Are we going to be able to do the poll today, or should we not try to do that?
Let me check how much are we. It's building up. The audiences are building up on YouTube. So let's give it some more time. And in the meantime, we can continue the conversation here. I already see that Dr. Akhtar's raised her hand. So, we can give chance to the panelists to reflect upon each other's statements here.
So I guess as part of that reflection, I'd like to focus it on these statements. Can you update the statements from the Google Doc into the text on YouTube? You're muted.
Sorry, we'll try to do that for sure. Yes.
Okay. So even though you can't see this, I'll just highlight some things I took from the presentations. In the letter F, there was one: journalism educators need to do away with strict academic compartmentalization and explore meaningful media and academic collaborations. And I think collaborations is a big word there. And it isn't just academic, but it's between the theory and practice. And then from Tanu's, I added, and build diverse, inclusive cultural competence at all levels. And I think that is said lots of good things, but that was, I think, one that fits in here. I combined the first two speakers in a new I, and that is that SAMCS needs to address the intersections of climate risk, nuclear insecurity, natural hazards, vulnerable population impacts, and I think this is another key point, and shape realistic solutions to address our sustainable development goals. And so that's a solutions focused on a whole range of issues, but it's really understanding them and building that understanding. And then the last new one I pulled out was, it isn't just coming up with the solutions, but how do you actually get engaged and support good policy making, fact-based decision making by our legislative bodies, by our programs, and assure that implementation. And Nandini talked about the roads and the healthcare systems and all of these things. Media and communication studies is an important element of not just getting the word out, but being part of that policy making and program implementation. So I guess what I would ask our panelists to kind of react to what you heard each other say. Obviously, you each have your own expertise, but clearly collaborations and intersections has been a theme in all of these. Any suggested edits to these items and or additions to them? And I see Rabia has her hand up.
Absolutely. So we'll start with Dr. Akhtar. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I think this has been a really fascinating discussion. And I do take my initial comments back that people with such diverse backgrounds, trying to find common themes. There are plenty out there. So, and it was reflected very well by each speaker. I would make some comments about Professor Sarkar's presentation about climate risk and the kind of work that she does. There is an absolute overlap with the kind of risks nuclear weapon pose to climate. And unfortunately, as much as the world is talking about climate change, there is very less nuanced voices and research out there about nuclear winter when it's going to hit after a nuclear use. And even before nuclear use, when the world is approaching towards a nuclear war or strategic weapons exchange, the vulnerability of population, people moving in masses, trying to find a safe place. There are some researches that have happened, and the figures are just and they're based on simulation exercises, but, they are just amazing, mind-boggling as to why isn't there much talk about this. So for example, 34.1 million people could die, and 57.4 million people could be injured in the first few hours if Russia and United States exchange weapons, even if they're low yield weapons. And to remind the audience, Pakistan and Indian weapons, or even to that effect, Chinese, are not on a red alert status. They are not pointed towards each other. So the nuclear decision making that's going to happen is going to have is going to happen after some deliberation. With respect to Russia and United States, their weapons are pointing at each other, and any nuclear accident or inadvertent use, can happen. So the world is really standing at a point where, there needs to be much more talk about climate risks generating from this existential threat that nuclear weapons pose. So I completely agree, and I think more research needs to be done, with respect to bringing that information out and raise awareness about it. With respect to nuclear winter, which is going to be terrible if any nuclear use happens. So thank you, Professor Sarkar, for pointing that out with respect to several themes in your talk. I really enjoyed Dr. Ravinder's talk about, using other lenses to come to terms with other realities, because if you continue to just use one lens, you obviously will think that there is one reality surrounding you. And we in South Asia, unfortunately tend to forget that there are more lenses that exist, and ours is not the only one. So thank you so much for your talk. And Dr. Lakshmi Kanta, it was really, I really enjoyed your talk. It was much learning for me. Health and road safety, of course, is a huge issue in South Asia, not only in India, but also in Pakistan as well. And sometimes one wonders, if Europe can have solar bike lanes and solar roads, we have plenty of sunlight here in our part, so why aren't we benefiting from that and moving towards sustainable energy? I really enjoyed Dr. Kohli's presentation about globalization and innovation. And again, with respect to this broader cultural studies thing, I was wondering how much of, because it's part of my own work as well, can we add strategic culture and talk about, countries that have nuclear weapons and have the strategic culture that sort of forces them to continue to hold on to their weapons. Can that strategic culture discussion become part of the larger cultural studies? Because if you want to raise awareness about the kind of effect these weapons can have, then I think it needs a much broader discussion and needs to reach a much larger audience. And it is very, very limited in security studies and strategic studies circles only. So I was just wondering, I'd like to hear if we could, in our curriculums and all, when we talk about culture, can we add strategic culture to the debate as well? So thank you so much. I'll end.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just going to kind of build with a follow-up question here. This idea of the intersection of nuclear security, hazardous, natural hazards, all the different impacts in this media culture of sound bites, how is it that you can, achieve that kind of multidisciplinary, multi-lens perspective? How do we build that, and then how do we teach the students to be able to apply that?
Thank you, Tom. Dr. Sarkar, if you'd like to reflect on that and also reflect on Dr. Akhtar's comments on your initial thoughts. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think as I noted before, I think Dr. Akhtar, you really like kind of hit the point that, you know, risks are interrelated, and therefore the research needs to not only focus on individual risks, but, you know, really focus on the systemic risks, right? Like that's the sort of new kind of research pathway that we are starting to focus on, is looking at systemic risks instead of individual risks. And I think that's where these intersections will really lie. And that's where, you know, like Dr. Tom said that, or Dr. Taylor said that, you know, how can we look at this from the perspective of students and the media? I think that's where it really needs to see, is like, we have to start looking at understanding systemic risks, and the media itself has to understand what systemic risks are and understand the nuances of this. And that's not a particularly easy thing to do. As Dr. Holland said, you know, we have sound bites now, and we have very short media sort of bursts, and our awareness campaigns are shorter, right? So I think this is something that we really need to ask ourselves: how do we do this? How do we understand the nuances, and how do we understand these sort of overlaps of systems and still produce media content that is understandable and respectful of the nuances, right? So I think that's one thing that I would definitely think is sort of our future forward. But I was just responding to my other panelists. I think Dr. Nandini had a very, I mean, the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals are sort of, you know, the global aspirations, right? I think all countries are sort of working towards accelerating their 2030 agenda and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think there's enough, so obviously it's a global agenda, but there's a lot of work now going on in how to sort of downscale that, right? How to downscale these global goals to the country level context, then downscale it at the community level context. And I think this kind of work is what is really needed, is how do we get these aspirational goals that are global and look at it from the point of communities. And I think, as Dr. Ravindran said, you know, he noticed like so around him, like locations and social milieu of those locations. And I think this is one area where, you know, digital technologies and just advanced technologies are so key, like especially in our field in disaster risk reduction. Things like satellite technologies are key to really understanding the risks and when there's a disaster, to get emergency medical supplies as quickly as possible. So we do a lot of work with space technologies. We do a lot of work with geographical information systems, which is basically location-based data. So we can really start focusing on where those vulnerable populations live and where are the intersections of risks within those vulnerable populations that are really making them making it so challenging for us to, you know, not be successful enough in achieving SDG 3, for example, which is SDG on health. So I think that's sort of, to me, that's like the global context. And I know it's complicated, right? It's not an easy issue, but I think if students at FSU and students in other areas can start looking at this in a sort of comprehensive manner, not just have one specific thing that they're looking at, but really see how even their research interests trickle onto other research areas and other areas that are intersected. I think that would be sort of the way to go. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarkar. Dr. Ravindran Gopalan, I see your hands raised. So if you'd like to please go next. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vaibhav. I thank the co-panelists, Rabia Akhtar, Madhurima, Tanu Kohli, and Nandini for provoking more thought. Approach, a typical media studies approach, where we end up studying what media are doing.
Dr. Ravindran, sorry to interrupt you. I think there's a lag in your video. So if you'd like to switch off your video, maybe that will give you more bandwidth to just keep the audio on. Thank you.
Yeah, I will repeat. I said I thank my co-panelists, Rabia Akhtar, Madhurima Sarkar, and Tanu Kohli and Nandini for provoking more thoughts on imagining our futures. And imagining our futures on a different line was suggested by my dear panelists. And I appreciate all of them for this opportunity to share more thoughts on this. Now, all of them, in my opinion, are trying to say a point which they didn't put it explicitly. I am reading it in my own way. The bane of communication studies or the approaches of communication teachers and researchers in South Asia. They are doing in terms of a predominantly media studies approach, which is a very polite term I am using for a trade-driven approach, which was pointed out by some of the panelists yesterday, particularly Professor Biswajit Das. Some 3-4 years back in an academic conference, one of the senior professors, he told me, he told the audience that this was probably around 2016 and 15. I'm not sure about the exact number he would be having. He said there are 600 plus departments of communication, media studies in India, and he was wondering about the implications of these 600 plus. This could be nearly 1,000 now. I am not sure. We don't do self-audit. That is the most unfortunate thing. Fortunately, slowly, networks of academics are emerging, such as the one Professor Biswajit Das and myself founded, All India Media and Communication Association, possibly how to go about teaching these areas which affect our everyday lives, okay, ranging from sustainability to climate change, okay. In all this, I still find that we are missing out on something which I call as critical pedagogical approaches. You have chosen a brilliant anchor as a theme, imagining our futures, okay. Particularly, you have chosen this theme at a time when COVID pandemic has exposed academia as well as the media and communication studies department in different ways. I can only conclude like this. To imagine our futures as somebody either as a teacher, researcher, or student is not enough, I think. We need to transform our locations as a meaningful somebody. Now, do with my everyday life. Majority of Indians, particularly Indians in rural India, have no clue about how things afar are affecting them, or how things that have come at their doorsteps are affecting them, will affect or kill their children. So the way out is to get into a different kind of scholarship, different kind of pedagogy, to get out of our classroom psyche, to get out of the fixed syllabus psyche, to get out of the preordained structures of learning, which I call as a class outside class room. And in my own experience during the past 12 years, with the help of a group of students, I have made some impact among future journalists and future communicators, and among young children in these communities which are around the universities, which are far off from the universities. Okay, so that the communities, people find a certain resonance.
You're cutting out.
Represent the people, but we can change how our journalists, young journalists, are going to work in future with these issues. I hope I was audible.
Yeah, there is a lag in between, but we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I was trying to conclude by saying there is no way we can change the macro side such as media, because a majority of the television channels are owned by Indian politicians and political parties or corporates. So we no longer have the same ownership patterns to work with critical political economy approach. Even that seems outdated in my opinion. So because we have a strange political economy of media, so we can't work with the critical political economy approach that got roots in 70s and 80s in a different continent and apply in India with what I call as a strange political economy. So that disconnect is too obvious to see. So as individual teachers and researchers, we can change the next generation of scholars and students and teachers and media professionals, and bring about a group of community-centric approaches to our pedagogies, and we can enable the young children and youth of these communities, wherever we are working, to become their own agents of change as journalists and filmmakers, etc., etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ravindran. We appreciate your thoughts, and you reflect again the themes that are emerging from the presenters as well. I'd like to invite Professor Lakshmikanta to provide her views and reflect on the other presenters' comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the way about nuclear weapons was presented, Dr. Rabia Akhtar. It was really very interesting. You know, there are a lot of understanding the educational level of both our countries. We know what are the hearsays. You know, they have a button, these people have a button blast, all those things. Very interesting inputs and very nicely presented. And I think it was Madhurima Sarkar who spoke about climate, right? Yeah, it's we you know, when it was really interesting that the entire South Asia at least should focus on climate change, and the research should be in this particular area. Particularly recent in last 2-3 years, we have seen devastating effects of rain in the southern part of India. Particularly roads were cut off and floods were hit. Kerala got devastated. In Karnataka state, Kodagu got devastated. There was a devastating untimely rains, crops loss. Then when you look to the basic, when you enter into the basic thing, I mean, be it in Kodagu or in Kerala, the greed, probably I shouldn't be using this word, but yes, it is that the greed of the farmers to convert mountains which could hold rains, which were once full of trees, into rubber plantation, and then also the tea estates, and then ginger, right? And this loosens the soil, and there is a landslide. When you look to Himalaya, basic structure of construction itself is it's a frequent. Flying stones are very frequent, but it need not be so in the Western Ghats. Western Ghats are thickly dense. They are known for their forest, natural flora, fauna, but yeah, we have been. It is we who have brought in this devastating effect on the environment, our own greed. And yeah, on the same note, then we should we not progress economically? Should we not progress transportation? Because the moment the population rises, there is a huge demand for the construction of roads. Sorry, I come back to road again and again. But nowadays there is a talk on green highway. So probably green highway is the solution. So probably the entire South Asian countries, if we stress on the green highways, probably one, we can take care of the climate. Then we can take care of the transport. We can grow rich in transportation, tourism, and all that. Visitors are also comfortable. All this, I mean, from economy perspective, it's very interesting. I am very less educated in defense, so let me not say anything regarding that. Then I wish to, Ravindra Gopalan, my senior colleague, very nicely put about the educational system. Very true. I think we have more theoretical approach except in, of course, in Manipal, we stand as an exception where we give we give a lot of practical oriented education. But when you look to the entire educational system, particularly related to media and communication, that's how we we provide the terminology. We find there is a lacuna, there is a dearth about theoreticians' knowledge towards the applicability of the subject. I don't know if you people remember this cartoon. When a student finishes his graduation, he's shown from moving from dark. It was in Hindu, published in Hindu. Keshav had written this particular cartoon. A student moves from dark to light, whereas the teacher is shown in the dark, and student is moving from dark to light. It signifies how is our academia. Even our research projects or research observations, we try to find our ourselves placed in Scopus Index or Web of Science, and we are chasing, we are literally gone mad with our rat race. How many of us take it to the newspaper or television medium or radio to take it to the grassroots? Because the change.org should happen at the grassroots for an overall change in South Asian perspective. I think the collaborations of research should happen more in these area. Tanu Kohli ji, your talk was really very interesting. You talked on health collaborations, you talked on health issues. It was interesting. Anything which you want to take forward, I'm always there. I vote for you.
I think that's a right
Thank
segue to invite Dr. Kohli to reflect on the most recent comment, as well as the comment that Dr. Rabia Akhtar made about how can we add strategic culture within this, hybrid culture, pedagogy that
Right.
you discussed earlier. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. I feel very validated right now, where I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But to come back to what Dr. Akhtar mentioned in the beginning, I absolutely agree with you that there should be a strategic culture focus in what cultural studies largely is. And there is, but we look at it, but it's largely and incidentally in the field of political science, political economy. I trained as a political economist, and we talked about strategic culture all the time when we were talking about Cold War, or you talk about Indo-Pakistan, like Indo-Pak nuclear strategies, and you're like, oh, what's the strategic? What are some of the strategies that are being used to mobilize populations? And so we do talk about strategic culture and culture war, and there is research on that, but whether cultural studies is also focusing on it. So is the movement coming only from political economy? I do agree with you that there should also be a movement from cultural studies. And cultural studies is largely the anthropological, sociological field. So maybe that's where the disconnect is. And so it's not like it's not present, but there's a disconnect which needs to be bridged. And that's where, again, as Dr. Gopalan said, and Dr. Lakshmikanta said, and even Dr. Sarkar said, there is a lot of room for teachers to be able to build those bridges. Because, say, if I am teaching my students popular culture, I should also talk to them about diplomacy and negotiation and how we use popular culture to talk about things like the Red Scare, right? Or how do we use popular culture as a way to talk about tourism? Those are all strategies that are being used to bump up one set of ideas over the others. So I hope that answers your question. And I think this is where global learning piece comes in. And as Dr. Sarkar pointed out, when we are thinking about intersectionality of security threats, security itself, one of the challenges we see when we are in our disciplinary silos is that in political science or international affairs, international security, security is about war. But time and again, interdisciplinary scholars have showed us that security is not just about war, it's also about life, human security, security from food scarcity, and so on and so forth. So there I found Dr. Sarkar's comments on this complex interdisciplinary focus that we need to have and need to keep on reiterating, very, very important. And perhaps that's a space where I do have a question for both of you into how we as teachers and practitioners then bring in to our students to present the complexity of the complex interdependence of this local and global dynamic, right? How do I explain to an average FSU student that climate change is going to lead to can lead to wars, can lead to migration, can lead to further other problems, right? So I think that's a direction to think about and how do we do it, and any practical advice, because you are both practitioners. You are the ones who can guide academics who, as Dr. Lakshmikanta said, sit in our dark silos. you can guide us. And then as far as Dr. Gopalan, Dr. Lakshmikanta's comments are concerned, I do think that when I talk about decolonizing the curricula, what you are saying is a part of that process, right? You're very right that teaching and learning needs to radically innovate itself. The way we teach and study is, we're going to sit in the classroom, we'll do a bunch of theories. If you are in medicine, you get some experience out of it, but with social sciences, you don't always get that field experience. And the innovation that we have had in the past few years is, okay, let's make sure our students do internships. But internships themselves are an elitist thing, right? Students want to go and work for the World Bank or UN or their state government. A lot of students just don't kind of go like, I'm going to go work in the local community unless they are from the local community. So when you talk about the radical ways in which we need to change the way we teach, decolonizing the curricula comes there as well. Maybe we need to leave the classroom and we need to gain community experiences. And that's how we have to re-envision. That's where the cultural studies field will have to re-envision itself, or any other discipline as well. And so I think those would be my main observations about what all of you said, because it does echo what I've been trying to say with the notion of have diverse perspective, have decolonized curricula, practice. Academics should practice more rather than just trying to teach in the classroom. And I myself am guilty of not practicing enough, but maybe then we need to step back and see what we can do. So when Dr. Lakshmikanta, you mentioned that you're doing these podcasts and you work with these women. I think that's a brilliant way of getting your students to think about the world beyond the books, right? So anyway, that's all my time. I'll stop now. But thank you so much.
Can I add something here?
Please go ahead.
There two very interesting experiences. One of my podcasts was on rivers. Is rivers. It's in Kannada, but I wanted to create awareness amongst local people who stay on the banks of rivers are all localites, right? So I want to use the local language to create. In this, I club the mythology. India is full of mythological stories. So I club mythology and the present status where the pollution happens, and it has received wonderful response. And I share it. I am shameless. I share it with everybody. I blow my own drum. Otherwise, people will not listen to us. Everybody, I'll say, I will talk on it. You call me. I will say that. I self-invite myself so that. So I'm motivated by the response I got. I thought I should lead another method. So morning we have a lake in Manipal. This is one aspect where I got very positive reflection. We have a lake in Manipal which is around 2 kilometers width. It's a self-sustainable lake. So I used to go for a walk. And I used to carry a bag where people will have thrown plastics, waste, this and all that. So there are waste baskets, but still people do not have the culture, Tanu, culture. So they do not have the culture of, using the waste basket. So I started doing that. And once I saw a plastic bottle in the lake, and I wanted to pick it up. Water was full and I wanted to pick it up. In the whole process, I slipped and fell into the lake. And literally 4 people came, and I'm a huge person. people, 4 people had to come and lift me up. And the advice I was given is, ma'am, you pick, but you pick something on the, which is on the way. Don't go yourself and dump yourself into, every day we will not be here to rescue operation. So see, and this lake, people who, why I told you this instance is, people go around this lake are all educated. They're not, they're all educated, people belonging to high class, they're all students. Yeah. And they celebrate birthdays there. But, I have seen in US and Europe, the way they celebrate birthdays around the lake, but they clean their garbage. Here, less the said better. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I want to just respond to that, because I think it connects back to what Dr. Gopalan was saying earlier too, right? We are all people who have had relative amount of privilege in our life. We need to admit that, and we need to think about our own positions and how we might be perpetuating that lack of diversity that I was talking about, right? So when you have an educated person walking around the lake, not picking up the trash, it's because of our deeply embedded culture which says it's not my job to do it. And so what can be done for us to face ourselves and go like, why is this not my job to do? And I might sound like, very outside of the psyche of say Indian culture, because I'm sitting in the US, but isn't that what critical thinking is about? You want to ask yourself, why should I not pick the trash? It doesn't make you lesser, right? When you pick the trash and put it in the trash can. But most of the times we are products of our societies. We are products of the way we have been taught and brought up. And the way we might be taught and brought up is, don't pick the trash. It's not your job. It's below your status. You focus on study, not realizing that this is also a big part of education. Civic education is a big part of education.
Thank you, Tanu. I see Dr. Ravindran's raised his hand. So if he wants to quickly give us a comment, and then I would give it to Dr. Taylor for the summaries. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm coming back to Dr. Taylor's observation of question. He raised a point, how to go about addressing some of the earlier points of the panelists towards a move towards multidisciplinary approaches. I think the problem is on account of our curriculum in India. In many of the cases where we don't teach the students, or we don't tell our young colleagues about the multidisciplinary origins of the discipline. At least during 1930s and 1940s, there was no discipline called communication, and all the contributions came from scholars working in other disciplines, Lazarsfeld, so many others. Now, in India too, between 1917 and 1950s, I find a very eclectic approach. May not be a multidisciplinary approach. It was a pure liberal arts approach. In the first 20-30 years, journalism was one of the 11 or 12 subjects taught during the 40s. And in my city, between 1917 and 1920. So we lost sight of this multidisciplinary origin of the discipline. The sooner we get back to this origin, better. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Dr. Sarkar's hands raised. So if you want to give us a comment, thank you.
Sure. Just final comments, because I think Dr. Lakshmi had spoken about the issues with, sustainability versus economic future, and I think that's an interesting issue to look at. And I think one of the key players in that is really looking at the sort of new models and from the IPCC models and the shared socioeconomic pathways, and really starting to look at those and seeing what the sort of key assumptions are, because there are pathways that are not as bleak, and they're not. There are some positive pathways and some measures that we can take. And one of the key things that we work on is really looking at nature-based solutions and ecosystem DRR, which is really focused on looking at how do we exactly do that? How do we provide the ecosystem-based DRR, but still keep the livelihoods of populations who really are, that's their key livelihood. And I think that's one of the sort of push from what I have seen is even in our work is, especially in the last, I would say 3 to 4 years, it really is nature-based solutions, ecosystem DRR. How do we actually establish this? And building awareness through media, through various media platforms on ecosystem-based DRR, and looking at solutions that actually improve livelihoods of populations, instead of, like you said, there might be, it's mutually exclusive. And I think there is definitely scenarios where they're not mutually exclusive, but they go parallelly. So I think that's something that we can definitely explore. And the second thing is, I think one of the panelists mentioned that academia, academia should learn from practitioners. But I think on our side, what amazes me all the time is how much research there is in academia that doesn't sort of move away from like you said, the journals over to a larger panel. So I think from our side, what we really do is we try to collaborate with a lot of universities to get that really rich evidence-based, risk-informed research over to the policymaking side. So I think that's one of the things that we are always open to, is looking at how to collaborate with academia. We have we already have collaborations with universities in the Asia Pacific, and that's something that we're always sort of looking at and open to, is looking to see how to bring that rich research into the policy arena. Yeah, so I think those were sort of my two comments. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarkar. I'd like to invite Dr. Taylor for the revised summary statements, but at the same time, I also want to hear from our panelists to the questions being asked on YouTube, as well as from the other panelists. So we'll go with the summary first, and then we'll have quick summary of questions asked by the audiences. Thank you.
Very good. Let me just, I've been taking notes through this, and this isn't reflected on the YouTube, but it's going to be available to everyone. It's kind of the collective thinking, and I just want to highlight, some of the areas. I think labor rights was mentioned, the importance of representing regular people. Nandini talked about helping them tell their stories. And that we need to have ways to help people move closer together and make sure that we're not just placating the privileged, that there needs to be objectivity in news and subjectivity in creative genres, that independent media is important for democracy, and that a lot of media focuses on private actors and economic development, and this needs to be carefully monitored, and that we need to build diverse, inclusive cultural competence in our students and teach this multidisciplinary history of the discipline and help them give clarity to complexity. G is, this idea of cultural communication and technology. How do we move people from chaos to cooperation? And, how can we reduce inequality? I think that the South Asian media and communication studies needs to address the intersections, come up with realistic solutions, see the systematic risk. And I think one of the last statements was, how do we build positive, possible scenarios for the future? We have lots of doom and gloom, but there's an alternative that communicators can, produce. The last couple are that we need to be involved in actual policy making and program implementation. I think the Green Highways was an example, and other solutions that can be actively supported. There were several comments on research, looking at the intersections and interconnections between the different topics, disciplines, and the global to community levels with an emphasis on grassroots work and research. And then promoting public media sources, that the current sources are too often controlled by political and economic interest. So with that summary, share some of the questions from the audience, and then we'll give every one of our panelists a chance to make a concluding comment.
Yeah, thank you so much for your summary. And as we can see, these themes might seem broad, but they are certainly leading us to a direction that we all unanimously want to go into in the future, all from the perspective of research, pedagogy, as well as policy. So thank you so much again. I'd bring in a few questions from the audiences. Some of them are direct to a few presenters, whereas the others are, common to all. So in answering those questions, specifically, also do provide your concluding statements based on the discussion that we had today. And we'll go one by one, starting with Dr. Akhtar. You have a question from Dr. Nirupa from Sri Lanka. She's also one of the presenters, and she attended our virtual networking session earlier today. Her question is, I'd like to know from Professor Rabia Akhtar how the media plays a role in developing securitization on the two nuclear enemy states in South Asia.
Thank you so much. So if you are still with us, I'll be brief. I think the drift of your question is right. Media does play a very critical role in securitization, not only of the two individual states, but also their conflicts. I think there is a worldwide trend about hyper right-wing nationalism, populism. It's called neo-nationalism as well, militarized nationalism. So whichever tag that you want to give it, I think there's a worldwide surge in it. And both India and Pakistan, are suffering from it. I'll just give you a very brief example of as to how media, and it's variant in social media as well, can actually exacerbate the crisis dynamics between India and Pakistan. So the Balakot strikes in 2019 and capturing of the Indian pilot by Pakistani side, before the government of Pakistan could even decide to release the pilot back to India, we already had fought a war, both sides on Twitter. There already had been use of nuclear weapons on Twitter, and millions had already suffered on Twitter. So this is just a very small reflection of the psyche that exists. And it's really unfortunate that media, instead of providing sane voices during the times of crisis, actually brings in right-wing hyper nationalist tendencies from both sides. And I think absolutely there needs to be a balance, and I don't know how it will be done. Probably it will be a generational change that needs to come through education, through much awareness, through intersection that all of us have talked about today. In my concluding remarks, I would simply say that, this has been an extremely enlightening learning experience for me, myself. Dr. Kohli had talked about, how can we bring in this interdependence from local to global. And I think one way to go about is by producing joint curriculums, which bring in this interdisciplinary approach, because our curriculums are also in silos. We all realize there is an intersection, but our curriculums don't reflect that. Even within the same universities, within disciplines, within major faculties, there is very less joint programming that's happening. So I think that needs to happen. And lastly, when I was listening to all of you with respect to future of South Asia, for example, largely, there is absolutely zero talk about shared future and shared risks. There is nobody talking about shared futures, nobody talking about shared risks. And I think unless and until we in our individual capacities and also in our collective capacities talk about shared future, we are not going to get anywhere. So I think there needs to be a conscious effort on part of the academics, the scholars, the practitioners together, and policymakers to think about telling our next generations that our future is shared. And so whatever happens across the border is not going to stay across the border. It is going to affect all of us. So with this, I would like to thank everybody for giving me an opportunity and being a part of this fascinating conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Akhtar. It's been a great experience listening to your comments and your learning more about your research and your work as well. So thank you so much for your time today. One common question that applies to, I guess, everyone is, as an old adage goes, never let a good crisis go to waste. And we, during this chat, we talked about different types of crises. We talked about natural hazards. We talked about nuclear disaster. We talked about crises, internal, health crisis, infrastructure-related crisis, pedagogy-related crisis, culture-related crisis. So it's an open question really to everyone, and try to answer it in any way you like with your concluding remarks, starting with Dr. Sarkar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a great question. I think it's also, I would like to, media is what we make out of it, right? So I think media can also be a source for real good. Especially during disasters, we see, I think during this most recent earthquake, volcano eruption in Tonga, one of the key things why emergency operations were able to get to locations as fast as possible is because of crowdsourcing Twitter and crowdsourcing media. So I think, yes, obviously, there is a big shift in the media landscape. And I think we're just starting to understand what it is and how to do the research and how to discuss it. But I do think that there is something to be said about sort of the decentralization of media as well, as much as Dr. Akhtar said, there are obvious issues with that as well. So I do think that hopefully, in the future, and this is where you can imagine, like Dr. Akhtar said, like a shared future is, how do we use this incredibly powerful tool to do better and to really understand and have better communication around. So I think that's one of the key things. And I think I would like to conclude by just saying this is a very eye-opening, as I think other panelists have said as well, very eye-opening conversation, because as we see, there is definitely a lot of work that can be done. And I think that's a positive thing, you know. It's always good to have things to aspire to and things to sort of look forward to doing more research on. And I think that's a really key issue. And I think I'd just like to sort of end with looking at, you know, the policy implications for all the research is really to have more collaborations. And I think this is sort of a key platform and a great initiative for getting people from, you know, as you said, academia, as well as sort of the policy side, to really come together and see how to take forward sort of the research, the rich research that is being done in academia, and how to take that forward into the policies. So thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here. Thanks.
Thank you, Madhu. Dr. Ravindran?
Thank you, Vaibhav. I have nothing to say. My panelists have said everything. One last statement. We have turned opportunities into crisis. That is a new crisis I am trying to relate to. Previously, we had opportunities to encounter crisis. Now we have opportunities as crisis. One example is during the last 2 decades, we have had better access with technologies of internet and mobile phones. And these better access have not enabled us, particularly academics, okay? We have distanciated ourselves like everyone else in the community. So father is talking to son over mobile phone in the same apartment. Son is talking to father over for the last 2 years, both teachers and students are forced to lead a virtual existence. I'm worried when the face-to-face classes resume in my university or in India, in a real way, as in the past, there will not be any such encounters. So both the pandemic and the technologies which made our lives comfortable during the pandemic are waiting to kill the real linkages with our communities and people. We will not be wearing the same lenses when we encounter our students face to face. We will not be wearing the same lenses when we go to field work in communities. So this is an opportunity becoming a crisis. Thank you for this opportunity as well.
Couldn't be put in a better way. So thank you so much for your words, Dr. Ravindran. I see Professor Lakshmikanta is on a call, so let's move to Dr. Kohli and have her reflect and give us the final concluding comments. We'll come back to you, Dr. Lakshmikanta. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't want to take too much time, but I would like to iterate something that goes back to Dr. Akhtar's point of shared futures. And one of the things that was brought up in the keynote yesterday by Dr. Sheikh and Salim was this importance of media literacy. And I think, I completely agree with all the panelists here that a big portion of our future, an imagined one, a shared imagination future, all of those combinations are going to be driven by the age of information. So even if you look at the whole Russia-Ukraine thing going on right now, you look at any crisis that happens between India and Pakistan, happens first on social media anywhere else, as Dr. Akhtar pointed out. So I think in the future, we need to keep two things in mind. One is that media literacy is going to be very, very important, because the youth who engage with each other, engage through WhatsApp, Twitter, Insta, TikTok. And this is where also the misinformation is happening. So media literacy should be part of this whole equation. All of our jobs will be much harder if it's not combined with media literacy. Another thing I want to come back to is that within South Asia, we do have a dominance of India and Pakistan, which is rightfully so, given that we are nuclear powers, we have a history of conflict. Sometimes we like each other, sometimes we don't. But perhaps that future also needs to think about countries like Afghanistan and Sri Lanka and Nepal, Bangladesh, where we do have lesser representation from, but these are also globalizing countries and also vulnerable to all of these threats that we are talking about. So not to forget our partners in this time is going to be very important. And that would be my concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kohli. Nandini, I'd like to invite you next. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, it was when I read the panel in earlier, I was I was in line of thought with Dr. Rabia Akhtar. How are we going to sync? Each one of us, one talks about nuclear, one talks about climate, one talks about health. How there will be a coordination between us.
We pulled our hair, Nandini. Sorry, we pulled our hair trying to figure that out ourselves as well. Please go ahead.
And one about education, no alignment with anyone. So I was just wondering, but it is really I think this itself is an interdisciplinary thought. Each one belongs to different area and each one is talking from different perspective and with one common goal, though not expressed. Again, I go back to Rabia Akhtar. Maybe why we didn't speak about how do we move forward together. This itself probably is a crisis. This itself probably is the kind of relations we are sharing, the sensitivity of the relation. I think in the years to come, this should resolve. When when we think about war, like many of us talked here, war is not just on the borders, it's internal, in the families, with the environment, wherever we are staying, with our own surroundings. So I think we need to combat it together, interdisciplinary, and I think that's the crisis. I think I'm getting very emotional now because we didn't think from this perspective. And it's giving us, and this is not what we are teaching students also. We have a set of syllabus and we just teach and then we say get lost. We have to focus on something else. But now, this is something which concerns Earth. We all belong to this Earth and we don't have, I don't know, everyone says we can go to Mangal. I don't know. I don't see Mangal or anything. We have to live here and we have to leave something for our future generation together. Only that can happen through common alignment of thinking and setting our goals for interdisciplinary. Thank you. Really, it was an interesting session. Thank you. I must thank you too, particularly my great connects from Florida State University. Thank you, Steve and Vaibhav. Of course, newfound friend, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nandini. We'll figure out whether Mars is safe or not. Once Elon Musk hears about his car, we'll know how safe Mars is. With that, I'd like to invite Dr. McDowell for his comments and help us connect everything together that's been discussed in this panel. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed both reading the the comments, seeing the presentations that were recorded ahead of time, and then looking at the core comments that you started with, and also how those evolved over the course of this discussion. And yeah, one theme that really does come out of this panel is that if we have a high expectation of media to reflect the importance of issues to citizens, to people in different countries, and media to serve democracy by, in a sense, setting the agenda of the important issues, we really do have to talk to lots of different sectors. And so that this is just we've got transportation, health, environment, security, just represented here, but that's, we expect good journalism to do that, but in terms of media studies itself and in terms of our own research agendas, we maybe focus more on the process of coverage and audience relationship to media. But this panel is a really eye-opener in terms of what we can think about and what we can learn. We talk about interdisciplinarity a lot now at our university, but it's still very hard because if we are in media studies, we have to kind of specialize on a core set of questions related to media studies, and it's harder to, even though we know branching out into scientific communication or health communication or environmental communication is or political communication, is really important. So, but having this discussion across different disciplinary boundaries, I think, has been very useful. So I really appreciate everyone's, as you say, your good faith in participating in this discussion that with folks from a variety of fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McDowell. So that was a wonderful discussion. I realize that it's getting really late night hours in most parts of South Asia that our panelists are joining us from. So we don't want to hold them for any longer. Just one concluding remark from my end is that we started this panel by saying the future is bleak, and we're ending it with saying that we're working towards a better future together. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So I love to hear it as a researcher, and I look forward to having this discussion at other platforms, and inviting you all again for our conference in 2023. But on behalf of the organizing committee of the South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference 2022, I'd like to thank our panelists for their time today, for their wonderful thoughts, and for guiding us into the future of South Asian, I would say, shared future of South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference, as well as research and practices. I'd like to quickly share my screen to acknowledge the work and contribution of the organizing committee members. This wouldn't have been possible without each one of these mentioned here, more, and more people. We've had conference partners, but just to quickly read out the names: Ms. Arya Adityan, doctoral student, Department of Religion, College of Arts and Science, Florida State University; Dr. Tanu Kohli, who is joining us right now, teaching faculty, Florida State University Center for Global Engagement and College of Social Sciences and Public Policy; myself, Ms. Michelle Lawson, Center for Global Engagement Programs and Beyond Borders Coordinator, Florida State University; Dr. Claudia Lipskind, Associate Professor of History, College of Arts and Social Sciences, FSU; Ms. Pooja Ichplani, doctoral student, School of Communication, Florida State University; Dr. John Mayo, Director, William A. Kerr, Intercultural Education and Dialogue Initiative, College of Social Sciences and Public Policy, Professor and Dean Emeritus, College of Communication and Information, FSU; Dr. Steve McDowell, Dr. Radha Modi, Assistant Teaching Professor, Interdisciplinary Social Science Program, College of Social Sciences and Public Policy, FSU; Ms. Sneha Nair, volunteer, helping us with promoting the event digitally; Ms. Rebecca Peters, doctoral student, Department of Religion, College of Arts and Sciences, Fulbright Hays Scholar, FSU; Ms. Amulya Rajpa, doctoral student, Christ Deemed to be University, who I'll have shortly on the screen to thank us on behalf of the Christ team; Bangalore, India, Fulbright Scholar right now at FSU School of Communication; Dr. Asif Sheikh, Adjunct Instructor, School of Information, College of Communication and Information, FSU; Dr. Tom Taylor, our moderator today, Associate Director, the FSU Social Science Scholars Program and Adjunct Professor; Mr. Michael Walsh, Marketing and Communication Coordinator, College of Communication and Information, FSU. And we have conference partners starting with Ruth Cade and Shepherd Broad International Lecture Series, College of Social Sciences and Public Policy, that sponsored the keynote from yesterday. The Center for Global Engagement, Engage Your World Speaker Series, also the co-sponsor for the keynote address yesterday, the Center for Global Engagement. College of Communication and Information, Florida State University. Christ Deemed to Be University, Bangalore, India. AICMA, New Delhi, India. And International Research Center, SIMEC Institute of Technology, Dhaka, Bangladesh. With that, I'd like to invite on screen Ms. Amulya Rajappa to help us conclude the panel and also tell us about Christ University. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Vaibhav. It was a very thought-provoking panel, and I'd like to thank all the panelists for sharing their interest on such diverse topics of interest. I think the kind of knowledge exchanged on this panel reflects the nature of our future also. It's shared, it's complicated, and it's nuanced, if I may summarize it that way. I'd also like to take a brief moment here to thank all the organizing committee members, faculty at College of Communication, FSU, and everybody involved with the South Asian Media and Culture Studies Conference 2022 on behalf of Christ University, Bangalore. There are academic partners for this annual conference. We hope to keep this robust collaboration going between the two universities in the future as well. Thank you for your time, and it's been a wonderful experience to be part of the SAMCS Conference 2022.
Thank you so much, Amulya. With that, I'd like to also thank the live audience on YouTube and also people who watched our presentations or who will watch our presentations, which are available on our conference website. Please do stay connected. More importantly, please do continue to stay safe and stay healthy. And here's to a wonderful future beyond the pandemic for everyone together. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.